You are listening to SPN, the Sports Podcasting Network.
من هناك لشوارزنيجر
ya lo hace, pierna derecha, directo al arco, golazo, golazo, golazo.
This is Soccer Today, live on SPN Radio, your new live show about the beautiful game in all its glory, with Duane, Rollins and Kevin Laramee. MLS, EPL, La Liga, Champions League, all is fair game. Powered by the Sports Podcasting Network. Visit us at sportspodcastingnetwork.com.
There are days when trying to fill an hour of content on North American soccer is very difficult because there's not a lot of news out there. And then there's days like today. Got a couple big news items that we're going to talk about. We're going to start with the RSL news. Brian Dunseth joins us on the line from out there in Utah. How you doing, Brian?
I'm doing good, man. Thanks for having me on, guys.
What's going on out there? We'll just start there. I guess that's the best way to start.
Yeah, I picked a bad day to be flying back from MLS headquarters and deciding to watch a couple movies on the flight instead of paying attention to the interwebs. Listen, there was a lot of pressure on this team heading into the season. And if you're an RSL fan, there was a vocal minority that was not happy with Brito Martinez and Javier Morales no longer with the team. There was even more of a vocal minority that wasn't happy with Jeff Cassar rewarded with a new deal that was announced late in the season as the team backed into the playoffs. And with the way the team started this season, a tough test at home against TFC, I thought they didn't go through with flying colors, but they were decent. Albert Rusnak added, Jordan Allen getting that right-hand side. And then they went to Chicago. And two unfortunate goals. One was very well spotted by Kevin Stott, a touch by Sonny, which kept Nikolic onside, and then a heavy deflection. Then we got to Saturday. And I thought they started really well. Brooks Lennon, Bofo Saucedo, both the U.S. under-20s that were really good in the CONCACAF tournament under Tab Ramos finally got the start. They looked bright. They looked dynamic. They looked energized. And then Soren Stoica started doing Soren Stoica stuff, where the referee had huge involvement in the game. Kyle Beckerman sent off in the first 45 minutes. And from that point on, things just kind of went sideways, even with an LA Galaxy 2 side, pretty much. So, I think there was a reality for Jeff Cassar that he was under pressure. The bigger reality was if you go back to last season, and I'm never a fan of going back to last season, in 9 or 10 games without the product, without the 3 points. And I think it just became time for Deloy Hansen, Real Salt Lake owner, to make the move. Now, the interesting thing about this, guys, is not only is it 3 games into the season, but this is the first time Deloy Hansen, as the owner of Real Salt Lake, has had to fire someone. Bill Manning had left. Garth Lagerwey had left. Jason Kreis had left. So we were all kind of waiting to see if Deloy, who is a business magnate, he's a giant in the business world out here, if he would pull the trigger from a sporting capacity. He did. And now I think there's a pretty good list for Craig Weibel that he's put together that now he's got to figure out what's the right way, what's the right match, and are they willing to buy people out of current contracts if so needed.
Yeah, you mentioned, let's stick with Cassar for a second here. I mean, he signs the extension for the year. Everyone knows that's a bit of a short lease that you're giving a guy, but I don't think anyone thought 3 games was how short the lease was. You mentioned at the start of the season, that LA game, I think you put that as an aside because of the red card there, the 2 yells, I should say. Why was this such a short trigger? What happened in those 3 games? Was there something happening behind the scenes that people aren't aware of, or was this just a case of maybe them almost working out a severance beforehand in case they needed to pull the trigger?
I think you could probably say, listen, when the team backs into the playoffs, RSL looked a lot like the Philadelphia Union heading into the playoffs, where it was almost like, do they really even deserve to be there, even though the points dictate that they do? I think also when you go into the offseason like that, you make those massive changes with Javier Morales and Burrito Martinez and Jameson Olave's time coming to an end as a player. You better be ready to try to absorb these new players, the Albert Rusnaks, the young guys, as quickly as possible into however you're going to play. I think it would be naive to assume that behind the scenes, Craig Weibel, Deloy Hansen, and Jeff Cassar didn't have come to Jesus moments. Expectations were heading into the 2017 season. But I think what spoke to me most in the statement that was released by Real Salt Lake, as well as Craig Weibel's press conference to the media at 5 p.m. yesterday out here in Mountain Time, was he basically said it was a cumulative decision. It was I'd made based on a cumulative amount of scenarios that were playing out in real time. So that leads me to believe that this was not a player situation, that they were revolting against Jeff Cassar. I think there were enough boxes checked for the staff to determine that, yes, even though it is 3 games into the season, now is the time that we have to move, because I would assume certain factors, certain barometers that are really concerning to what they're trying to accomplish this season.
Soccer and sports in general, Brian, are result-based endeavors. And when you're looking at Real Salt Lake over the last few years, it's not just the last 7 games of last year and this year. The project as a whole, the identity, the core players, the 2009 MLS Cup champions players that were the backbone of this team have slowly eroded, and the type of identity in the rest of the league have surpassed where RSL was. Are you surprised that Jeff Cassar is the maybe victim of having a squad of players, a group of players, and an identity of play that evolved over the last few years that wasn't necessarily up to where MLS 3.0 were going?
You make a fantastic point. And you look at what Cassar, and Cassar was Jason Kreis's first hire when he took over in RSL years and years ago. I always felt like, and you can throw the 2013 run to the Cup final in Kansas City into the equation as well, and I agree with you. It was always going to be hard to turn this team over, and Jason Kreis and Garth Bogway at the time went all in one more year to try to win an MLS Cup, and they understood how dangerous that could be, because in real time from 2012 on, we really saw the collapse of the Houston Dynamo, didn't we? From going all in. From Dero and Ching and Brad Davis, and then all of a sudden, not Rico Clark, and not being able to re-up with that type of talent. Jeff knew the difficulties. Craig Weibel, when he took over as general manager, knew that he was going to have to piece by piece turn this team over. And there'll be a time in the near future where Kyle Beckerman and Nick Ramondo's and Chris Wingert's time are finished as well. It's the nature of the sport, nature of the business. Where is he culpable in all this? If you want to hold him accountable, you can say the insistence of getting away from the diamond formation, which fed RSL's lifeline of possession and death by possession and chances created for so long. His insistence of getting away from that and creating his own identity and kind of the 4-3-3 or the 4-2-3-1 with Kyle Beckerman and Sonny, or Kyle Beckerman and Luke Mulholland sitting. Is this team a victim of holding on too long? Yeah, it is. I mean, going with Javi last year, statistically, Javi Morales having statistically the worst season he's ever had for Real Salt Lake with 3 goals and 4 assists. He and Burrito Martinez tailing off significantly last year, even though Burrito Martinez was one of the most exciting individual players in the league. While, still with these struggles, being able to identify Justin Smith, a Justin Glad, being able to get Brooks Lennon on loan from Liverpool for a year, being able to go out and sign an Albert Rusnak, who I think is undercover one of the best signings in Major League Soccer this offseason. Just not enough people have seen him so far. So yeah, there's no one factor I think to point to, but I agree with you 100%. This is the continued evolution, and what I've been saying publicly. This next 3 years are kind of the fast forward button for Major League Soccer, where if you're not paying attention and you're not ahead of the curve, you are going to get punished significantly in the short term.
Now, when we're looking at the situation, the goalkeeper coach is taking over as interim manager, but for the head coach job, there's a few names that are already surfacing. Of course, Mike Petke being available and being coach of the Monarchs, being right there, is the first name on everybody's mind. But where does it leave Real Salt Lake's choices? Where would you go, Brian?
Well, let's see. If we put a list together, right? You can go the obvious ones. The link would be Robin Fraser back to Real Salt Lake, just because the history there, understanding the infrastructure, the fabric, the ethos of the club. I think if you want to step out of MLS, I'm still shocked, but I understand why. But I'm still shocked that Giovanni Savarese hasn't gotten a look in Major League Soccer, but I understand his loyalty on both sides with the New York Cosmos. I agree with you on Mike Petke. The only concern I think about Mike is the reality that he's been out of coaching for 2 full years. And do you just want to throw him back in after just signing with the Monarchs and just going through his first preseason trip with the team? And then you get kind of the outliers. You'll get the Tony Miolas, the John Harks, the Eric Winalda names that pop up where they sound fascinating because of their historical relevance with U.S. soccer, with somewhat, some have limited success, some have more success, some have, more of an outlier of success with young kids and developing. And is there anyone in college? You got a couple college coaches out there that are really, really interesting. I'm obviously Ziggy Schmidt's name will pop up. Obviously Bob Bradley's name will pop up. But outside of that, how big does the scope really go? And I would imagine that Craig Weibel, as any general manager would do, would have a list of guys that would be really interesting to have a conversation with and to gauge their interest. But as you guys know, as well as everybody else, what are the salary demands? Is there an attachment that you have to buy out? Do you have to ask for permission and then buy essentially that manager out of his current position? And then what's the perfect fit? What's the ideal fit? Who's willing to step in immediately with enough information about this team to not only get the guys to buy in, but to lead and follow this guy immediately? So it'll be really, really interesting to see which direction. And I'm fascinated to start to hear the whispers of guys being linked to this job.
If there was a Major League Soccer Hall of Fame, Kyle Beckerman would be a first ballot Hall of Famer. However, time is cruel. I'm wondering what you think he is right now for that club and whether he still has the capability to be sort of that general that he was for so many years for that team.
I do. I think, like anybody at that age bracket, you've got to start to be very sensitive about performance. And it's rightly so, right? Anytime you hit mid-30s, there's a drastic difference athletically between a guy like Jermaine Jones and Kyle Beckerman at that age group. But the one thing I'll remind everybody is Kyle's never been the fastest guy in the world. Kyle takes those little short choppy steps and he picks his positions really well. He kind of plays that pivot 6 perfectly. And, full disclosure, I played with Kyle in Miami when he came in the league at 17 years of age. So I probably am a little biased when it comes to how high of a level he plays at. But I will say that's another fascinating factor when it comes into the coach's conversation of where does he fall in line with exactly what this next iteration of Real Salt Lake's formation, shape, identity looks like. I think he can still definitely play. No problems whatsoever. His desire, his drive, his leadership, the ability, everything's there. Despite the Soren Stoika double yellow that we saw this past weekend. But as always, how good are you, or how poor is your performance based on the players playing next to you or the formation that you find yourself in? I'm not sure RSL can afford to go to a diamond and play Kyle deep lying, because that's a lot of running and a lot of understanding. A 4-2-3-1 is ideal, just to have a partner next to him to deal with some choppy ground. But as you guys said, 2 questions ago, this new edition of Major League Soccer, it's faster, it's stronger, it's more technical. Target allocation money's come into play. So 3 through 6 are essentially designated players now. Everybody's gotten a lot better. So the standard and the accountability being held for individual players is much, much higher than the past. I think Kyle, no doubt, if we're saying short term, definitely still has a year in him. Long term, I've never been around a kid that's more motivated, more competitive than Kyle Beckerman. And he leads this team the way that nobody else has ever led this team.
Fair enough. RSL signed Joao Plata to a DP contract in the offseason. Caught a few people off guard in terms of the fact that it was that DP status. Is he the type of player that you should be looking at a DP level right now? Can you build a club around that? Is he capable of leading them offensively moving forward?
Yes and no. Plata, for me, and you guys have known Plata since he was a young kid and was an outlier. With TFC. I love what Plata does. I love the individual athleticism, the constant desire to kind of flare in behind the right back and find those gaps and find those seams. He dances, free kicks. I think he's evolved. He's become much, much more mature. And I think it's a good buy. It's a smart buy for a Real Salt Lake organization that's not going to be able to really go in and dig deep and find those massive, massive big name players, because let's be honest, Salt Lake City's off the beaten path. You can see it. The same thing happens with NBA and the Utah Jazz. People just are so afraid of what Salt Lake City is off the field. They don't really know. They don't really pay any attention to it. I think Plata and Euro Movsisian, and the fact that Euro walked away from essentially about $6 million cash from Spartak Moscow at the end of his deal to sign a full-time long-term deal with Real Salt Lake was important. Albert Rusnak is important. And I do believe that RSL has the ability to use target allocation money on 2 of those DPs. I'm almost positive, but then again, concussions. So I think Plata is a good move for them. The one thing that I think everybody knows about Joao Plata, he's probably a 10-8 guy, 10 goals, 8 assists on the season, but he's also going to miss stretches because of his body. His body is, fast twitch muscle fibers, and he's going to pick up knocks. He's going to do his hamstring. He's going to do a hip flexor. So if you're okay with knowing that he's going to miss 5 to 10 games in a season, but he's going to get you 10-8, I think right now that's an acceptable number to pay a lower scale designated player in Major League Soccer.
I want to bring you, Brian, to a subject that you have been talking about on the broadcast the last few weeks. In the first 2 weeks in the season, early yellows for questionable fouls, very spread around the league. It has died down this weekend, but a lot of penalties this weekend, a lot of call, like you mentioned, with Soren Stoika. What is your thought on the refereeing in 2017, where we do see a certain cracking down, but the consistency during any single game and throughout all the entire game is quite questionable?
It's funny you bring this up, because I was actually with Simon Borg in the office yesterday, right before I jumped in a car and headed to the airport, and we were talking about the referees, because last year I did some of that instant replay before giving it back to Simon, because I was just it just was a fascinating animal of a video session. You go back last year, and the uproar over the first 8 weeks for all of these challenges. And anytime we saw studs showing red cards and red card after red card after red card. And what Simon and I were laughing about was last year it was studs. This year it's persistent infringement. We haven't seen so much in the points of emphasis, the pushing and pulling and the penalties. But we've seen a ton of dissent yellows. And I always say as a player, when I was a player, I just covered my mouth and I could drop any F-bomb that I wanted. But these guys nowadays, you can read lips, especially with all the cameras on the field. This is what happens, right? Every year there's these points of emphasis that come down from pro. And for the first 8 weeks, it's pretty significant. And I remind everybody that when you get all of these referees, including linesmen and fourth officials, when you get them in a room and you put something on the video and you say, is this a red card? And half the room says yes, and half the room says no. If pros points of emphasis say this is a red card, half of that room is saying no, it's not a red card. But they recognize that they have to recalibrate their senses and their decision making to change that and say, okay, even though I don't think this is a red card, I'm told that this is a red card. Well, that trickles into the game. And I will remind everybody that during these first 2 months of the season, all of these guys are trying to work. All of these guys are trying to get a paycheck. All of these guys are trying to get the best game of the week. So at times, I think we will inevitably see referees make decisions that they don't necessarily believe in, but it's parts of the point of emphasis. But I will also remind people that probably week 8, week 9 is when you'll see everybody back off a little bit. It's almost as if they're teaching the players what's acceptable for the season, and then they'll go back to what's normal. It happened last year. I think it'll happen this year. But in the meantime, I think inevitably, and Jeff Cassar could be a good case in point, points of emphasis. And with this cracking down, the accountability doesn't fall on the referees. The accountability falls on coaches whose jobs, whose checks, whose family, it's all on the line, and there's no accountability from that standpoint.
Now, we cannot talk to you today, Brian, without mentioning what happened last night at 11:30 p.m. Bastian Schweinsteiger acquired by the Chicago Fire, $4.5 million transfer, gonna join the Fire next week. As a former player of Major League Soccer, when you see it's a big name and people are questioning the validity and the choice in the identity of the midfield and the club, but we'll get to that later. It's Bastian Schweinsteiger coming to MLS, Brian.
Yeah, it's huge, man. One of the most decorated players in the history of the game, in a lot of ways. And we had heard for a long time that this could potentially be on the docket. I on SiriusXM, I was saying the moment that he was pushed aside by Jose Mourinho, that yes, the links would happen with Major League Soccer. It would be inevitable, especially with his wife retiring from tennis. Even more so. And then we saw the pictures of Veljko Paunovic and Bastian right before the new year having lunch in Manchester. The moment that Schweinsteiger started playing a little bit and then was added to the Europa League squad for Manchester United, it kind of changed the perspective a little bit. Chicago went on signing Nikolic, getting Juninho on loan from Tijuana. And then the big one was Dax McCarty. Pre-Dax McCarty, I would have said this is a great move. Don't focus on the money. Don't focus on the length of time. Chicago Fire just needs to win. They can't be any worse than what they were last season or the year before. It's a team that has been irrelevant off the field in Chicago since Cuauhtemoc Blanco retired. But now things kind of change. I look at a team in Chicago, and I was just out there the previous weekend. They need a right midfielder. They need a pure 10 because I think Michael Delu's not necessarily a 10. They need 2 center backs because Kappelhoff and João Mira, I don't think are up to the task. I'm not sold on Bava. I think they need a new right back. There's so many positions that they could have spent money on because I think Dax and Juninho have been a fantastic addition. Will he have the same effect as Jermaine Jones? That remains to be seen. I'm not sure. Is he going to play higher? Is he going to put Juninho higher? How is he going to work now with Dax and Juninho? 4.5, that money is for the back of the jersey alone. It's a bump that they'll need off the field. But I'm really fascinated to see how Veljko Paunovic adjusts his formation with so many good players in the middle part of the field, when big picture, I think they could have used that money in a couple different spots.
Yeah, no doubt that the marketing bump is a big part of it, and in Chicago they need that pretty badly. Brian, before we say goodbye for a final question, we'd be remiss, as speaking to someone who has represented the United States before, to get your opinion on Friday. How confident are you that the United States can start to turn around what has been a slow start in the Hawks?
Yeah, not at all, and that's not a knock towards Bruce. It's not a knock towards this group. It's not a knock because of the team losing so many influential players. With Jermaine out, I've never been sold on Timmy Chandler, but he's not available. Then you throw in Bobby Wood, Fabian Johnson, Brad Guzan just had his baby girl the other night. This team is missing some big pieces, but it's not about the United States. I don't think enough is being. I don't think we're paying attention enough as a fan base, if you're a U.S. fan, to how good Honduras is, to how dangerous Panama is. Panama just went to Honduras last phase and won 1-0 there. Honduras, if you've been watching the Houston Dynamo, Kyoto, Elise, Boniat Garcia, I mean, there's some really, really good players. So just because the United States is at home, it does not mean that it's an automatic 3 points. And I love having Bruce back. I think it was the best decision they could possibly make, with parting with Jurgen Klinsmann and going with Bruce. Bruce will give a clear-cut identity, a philosophy, and every single player will know what's needed of them on the field the moment that whistle blows. That was not the case with Jurgen. But again, this one's not about the United States. This is more about Honduras and Panama having 3 or 4 difference makers on the field. And the continued growth of CONCACAF in the region.
I like Panama a lot to make it to Russia. Brian, we do thank you for your time today on short notice. It's going to be a busy day, I'm sure, and we enjoy listening to you at all times. Thanks again.
Hey, thanks for having me, guys. Appreciate it.
You are listening to Soccer Today, live on SPN Radio. Visit sportspodcastingnetwork.com for more.
And welcome back. We should have Brian on Five Rings one day to talk about his Olympic experience. I've always been curious to get the perspective of soccer players on what the Olympic experience is. He of course represented the United States in Sydney, one of the U.S.'s best performances at the Olympics as well. But we do thank Brian. He's always got a lot of insight, which is why we cut into our block, Kevin and I's block, to talk about the RSL news quite a bit.
What do we know anyways? But always love talking to Brian. Always generous with his time, and always tremendous insight into media and player world. Love talking to Brian.
Exactly. Quickly, we do have 2 minutes left in the block, so we will fill it up. I'm surprised by the move this early, and it's the timing, not necessarily the decision in general, but whenever you make a move 3 games into a season, you have to question, I think realistically, you have to question why you brought him back in the first place if you were going to make the move so quickly, unless something significant happened. And listening to Brian right now, I'm not getting that anything did.
No, exactly. Well, nothing more than what probably happened before. That's what I can get out of it. So there was probably difference of opinion on where the direction should go in the future. And that in the off season might have come to some certain heated discussions that were maybe left unresolved, and after 3 results, maybe they chose to resolve that discussion in a way where they're saying, you know what, you go your way, I go my way.
Yeah, the only thing I can think of is that there was some discussions before the season about certain, maybe not even tactical, because I don't think I'd hope for the RSL fans' sake that it wasn't tactical, because if the owners shouldn't be
identity
dabbling into that side of things, but
identity
something
of
about the
players
direction.
Yeah, exactly. The identity of players, of play, of how you want to approach your season, basically.
Yeah, it's a strange one that way. But, sometimes when you get an extension, and we see this to tap into the Toronto experience because it's what I'm most familiar with. You see MLSE, the big company that has money. That's the one problem they don't have is money. They'll often sign extensions onto coaches and managers that are on a short lease, which essentially, as I said, not to be flippant about it, it's almost like a severance package that they're pre-working out. Okay, well, we're going to give you 1 year. If this isn't working out, we're going to let you go, but we're going to pay your contract for the year. And well, in that regard, he'll be taken care of for the rest of the season, you're sure.
Yeah.
In terms of who to replace him with, the list is out there. I still can't get over the fact that if you've got a guy in your system already in Petke, why not just bring him over? It seems the simplest solution. He did have some success in New York. He had a great deal of success in New York. He was loved there. Jesse Marsh came in and took them. I don't know if he even took them to the next level, but he certainly continued whatever success they were having. And so it's hard to really figure out exactly whether it was the players, or whether it was the coach in either case. But nonetheless, we'll see soon enough, Kevin. Any quick final thoughts on that before we delve into Schweinsteiger?
No, I can't wait to talk about Bastian Fire-Meister.
All right, let's take a quick break. We'll come back and we'll talk about Chicago's newest DP.
You're listening to Soccer Today on SPN Radio. You can find the on-demand version of this very show on iTunes, Stitcher, Feedburner, Podbay Player, Podbean, anywhere you get your podcasts under the Sports Podcasting Network feed. Subscribe to our YouTube page to make sure you never miss a live show talking about soccer today, the MLS postgame show, open lines after dark, 5 rings daily during the Olympics. Make sure you subscribe and give us a follow on Twitter at SportsPodNet and like our Facebook page, facebook.com/Sports Podcasting Network.
And we're back.
Duane, you know what I'm really looking forward to?
Yes.
Deep dish pretzel crust pizza from Chicago. Oh, that would be amazing. German culture, Chicago culture. Give me some piece of that pizza.
Kevin, I've been on a diet for about 4 months, so you should stop talking about stuff like that. That's okay. Schweinsteiger, look, 342 appearances for Bayern Munich. One of the legends there. He, of course, has 121 caps for the German national team, has won a World Cup, is only the second time in Major League Soccer history that a World Cup holder has come to the league. He's only 32. Think of him as a bit older than that, more of a 35 type player, although his body might be 35, if you know what I mean. And that's kind of the question that we have about Schweinsteiger in this particular time, in this particular place. Yeah,
no, you're right. You're correct there. But still, 23 trophies won. That's in the press release by the Chicago Fire today. There was a ranking of the players coming into the league having won the most amount of trophies in an entire career. And Bastian Schweinsteiger has won 23 trophies in his career, coming into MLS as the most ever decorated player to come play in this league internationally. And that is a step forward for the league. Again, we'll have plenty of time to analyze this play, to see if it was a good decision, to see if it fits the Fire's new way of play, new identity with the new players and McCarthy and all. They had some success already this season. Does it fit that? Those are all questions that we don't have answers right now. But what do we know right now? What we know right now is his name. His jerseys are already selling. It's a spark that the fans, after very difficult 5 years, can take and go with it and come back to the stadium, come back to Toyota Park, and come back and enjoy the Fire.
Yeah, look, I'll give this signing reminds me on a slightly higher level, not even a slightly higher level, on a higher level. Although the player I'm about to name was a German international that won a World Cup, or was in a World Cup final, I should say. it reminds me of Thorsten Frink signing in the sense that you look at the clubs, Chicago right now, you look at TFC at the time they made that signing, you bring these two German internationals in that have name recognition to sort of revitalize a franchise that, currently in Chicago's case and at the time in Toronto's case, that was starting to struggle for relevance in the market that they'd once been pretty successful in. Thorsten Frings was a successful signing for TFC in the sense that he brought some fans back in that stadium, that he brought some excitement back around that, because I don't care how cynical we all are that watch this league. And if we're hardcore day in, day out, like we are, the bubble, so to speak, then you're going to criticize moves like this sometimes as being name only. But at the same time, if you take a step back and you try and just put your fan hat on, you are a little excited still by the names coming in. You really are. And I think that we're deluding ourselves if we're not. When I saw this last night, my initial response was, let's go see what Chicago fans are saying. And when I went to Chicago-centric places on the internet, they were excited. They're excited to have a name. They're excited to think that maybe there might be more people in that stadium. Again, they're excited to think that maybe this is going to get more attention in local media in Chicago. And those are things that we shouldn't dismiss completely, Kevin.
No, and if you're looking at name recognition, Schweinsteiger is the biggest name to ever wear a Chicago Fire jersey without even having worn one yet in the modern era, but in the last decade.
Blanco, but yeah,
but like in the last decade, in this social media, global football game time, everybody's got the channel. You watch them play every single weekend. From Man United to, well, I was going to say not this year at least, last year, and other places. It's the first time of that era that you get a player of that name recognition. It's a big deal. Like Schweinsteiger. Listen to our intro. It's one of the first names. It's a goal that will be recognized in ages. It's that name recognition. It raises the level of the league, of the team, of everybody else. People in Germany will watch Chicago Fire game now because Schweinsteiger has its own fan club. People that just love the Bastian Fire-Meister and are ready to watch him at 3 a.m. in the morning if needs be, when they'll be on the West Coast, even later than that, because they love that. And that's what you kind of bring to the table too when you're adding a player of that caliber. I just remember here in Montreal when Drogba signed with Montreal, the amount of people from Africa that started listening to our show, to download the episode, from Ivory Coast to get the content because it's their hero. Bastian Schweinsteiger in Germany, in certain parts, yes, he's not maybe the best German player I ever know, but he does have a very big following, especially considering the scale of the Chicago Fire, and that will be very beneficial for the Chicago Fire, and they desperately needed that.
A quick anecdote. I was texting with my friend Jen this morning. Jen, who is a presenter with me for our rugby podcast, which we'll have a new one tomorrow, by the way, probably out Thursday, but we'll record it tomorrow. Jen is a TFC season ticket holder, and she works in an environment where she's not in the bubble, so to speak. She just knows the bubble, but she's not in it. But she's telling me this morning that she's already got 2 text messages from coworkers asking for tickets for the game in April in which Chicago comes to town, specifically because they heard this news this morning. That's one anecdote about one person in one city, but I suspect that that's going to be the case across the board. Another similar signing that I would that I put out there that this is more on the negative side is this kind of seems like the Gerrard signing as well, in the sense that you are bringing a name, a massive name in world football into MLS at this state of their career, in this state of the league's evolution. And we talked about this with Brian, and you wonder, and again, it comes down to the athleticism, it comes down to the drive, it comes down to the desire. You wonder
motivation,
how much influence you can have.
No, I forgot that Gerrard even played Major League Soccer. That's the legacy that Gerrard. No, he finished his career with Liverpool and he retired. Right, that's how it finished. The story, right? He didn't go elsewhere and didn't really pan out to be what people thought he would. Right?
There was I have memories of him having a vacation in California for a while, but exactly. Nonetheless, yeah.
No, but we're thinking as well. A Schweinsteiger is about 4 years, if not 5, younger than when Gerrard showed up. So there's something there too. Like, he's not that old, and he decided to do the transfer now, not giving the playing time that he wanted because he wasn't getting any. it comes down quickly. And usually back a few years ago, Duane, there was a transition club that would be example, former Premier League star goes somewhere else and then comes to MLS. Now MLS is there. Soon MLS will be even closer. And now 32, it's not that past prime. Yes, the last few months have been difficult for Schweinsteiger with playing time, but before that, he was at the highest level, playing at the highest possible league level and the internationally as well. So 32, it's still, in my opinion, on the descending maybe of the prime. Like it's on the peak has passed, but it's still pretty high, close to that peak.
The one thing I will say that I do like about him right now and like about his decision right now is that this doesn't seem like just a cash grab, but that you see in some cases. This is a player that wants to play. This is a player that, he could have just stepped aside after he won a World Cup and, won a Champions League recently with Bayern Munich. He could have just stepped aside at that point if he didn't have a drive to continue his career, right? He would have been a legend, a one-club career, a one-club player. Wins a World Cup, that would have been a perfect time to step aside, but he wanted to challenge himself further, went to England, had the chance with Manchester United, didn't quite get the opportunity that he thought he would when he made the move, but he was never satisfied with just sitting still there and collecting a paycheck for United, right? He did desire something, and he's desiring to make a move now in the middle of a season where he could have probably got some more minutes in Europa League, maybe even probably near the, once the United season had wrapped up and we knew what kind of position they were going to finish in, maybe he gets to play a few other games down the line to finish his time in England, could have made the move to Chicago in the summer and had the opportunity again to maybe play in a Europa League final, even maybe to play in another Manchester derby, maybe to play in some other big games that have European context to them. But instead, he's decided to go to Toronto in April, right? That's what he's choosing. He's choosing, rather than playing the Europa League, potentially playing a Manchester derby with the same weekend, actually, to instead make a road trip to
go to Columbus on a rainy Wednesday.
Yeah, that's to me testament to the fact that this guy wants to play. And I think we all who have played the game at any level can appreciate that, because there comes a point, regardless of what level you're at, where you need to find a better level that's for you so that you can keep playing. I mean, again, just to talk about, jobbers out there like myself, I kept moving my position further back in the field so I could keep playing. I just wanted to play. I get that. I find it refreshing when a professional seems to be doing a similar thing. And I would think that, and I'm not dismissing MLS and comparing it to beer leagues when I say this, but in the context of a guy that played 342 times for Bayern Munich, the Chicago Fire is definitely a step down, right? But he's choosing to do this because he wants to play. Two
words of advice for Bastian Schweinsteiger. So, Bastian, you're coming to Major League Soccer, all right? You're used to traveling in nice coaches, bus, not too long. Now, I have an advice for you. Get a good air miles program. You get a brand new card, get a brand new account. You're going to need it quite often. Trust me, it's going to be worth it. You'll have a lot of free flights. You have a nice little room that you can spend your time in, but get ready to take the plane quite often. And a good plane pillow so you can get your rest. A good way to rest your legs, because you'll see it's quite different taking the plane than taking the bus when you need to go travel the game. Because, well, Manchester City is a lot closer to Manchester United, if just a few blocks away, than crossing continent and a third of the planet.
Well, they do have to go into Manchester to get to play City, but that's another side. I do believe that the DPs, that there's nothing prohibiting the DPs within Major League Soccer of pulling their own credit card out and buying their own first-class seat, by the way. And I know that that's how David Beckham traveled a lot, and a lot of the DPs would do that. I don't think most of the players would hold too much accountable for that, whether you don't want to cramp it in coach. At any rate, that's another topic that we've talked about many times before. Look, we're not going to know until we see him on the pitch. And I think that it's unrealistic to suggest that he's going to jump straight in and start to immediately contribute. In fact, that game in late April in Toronto might be around the first time that you might realistically think that a player that's barely played in the past 6 months might be able to start to make a contribution. So we'll have to wait a few weeks anyway, I think, to fully understand what this might mean for the season for the Fire. But marketing wise, the Chicago Tribune today, there was a full page ad that the Fire put in there, which just was a photo of him holding the World Cup up with the medal around his neck and a big smile on his face with "Welcome to Chicago" written below it. So obviously, from a pure marketing standpoint, this is something that the Fire are going to try and take every single bit of advantage of. And that club has been close to irrelevant in that market for a while. So good for them for making something, to try and make something happen. You can't criticize them for that, Kevin.
No, I kind of felt weird talking about the Fire in a positive vibe and talking about the Fire with big name and acquisition. Yeah, I can get used to this. I'm happy for some Chicago Fire fan that I gladly got to know over the years. They're not all agree, but at least it's something to talk about rather than losses.
My one trip into Chicago, I was treated very nicely by all of their fans there. So, I wish them well as well. It's a market that should be amongst the top spenders, the top influencers in this league. It absolutely should be. It is a massive market that MLS needs to be successful if it's going to get a national footprint in a true way. If it's going to become one of the top leagues in the world by 2022, we haven't said that in a while. We'll see. Anyway, let's take a break. We'll come back. We'll end with some bits and bites.
The bits and bites on Soccer Today. St. Clair, you can get their latest EP. Moving on Bandcamp.stclair.com.
Got me cheating again. St. Clair. All right, Kevin. On any other given day, I might have led with this story, but today, no, not so much. Victor
Today
Vitagliani,
is just a part of the bits and bites.
Yeah, he was on Anthony Tatar's show last night, Red Card Radio. I listened to that live and put it out in my Twitter. I will have some articles up on Canadian Soccer News today, which sort of speak to this in a little greater detail in written form. I meant to do it last night, but I was so tired, and then the Schweinsteiger stuff broke. And anyway, you don't pay for it, so deal with it, guys.
Yeah, exactly. Deal with it.
All right. Victor said outright, and this. I'm going to lead with this one, and we've been talking about it so long that within our circles, again, and we said this yesterday as well, it's not news anymore, but amongst the general public, the fact that Victor Vitagliani would say 100% that the Canadian Premier League is real and it's going to happen, which is something he said yesterday, that should be a bigger news to me. That should be more exciting to me, but it's sort of just evolved so slowly on a slow burn that I heard the actual president of the CSA say that, it didn't have the same impact on me that it might have had he said it out of the blue 8-10 months ago, when I would have just went on Twitter and screamed, "I told you so" at everyone. But nonetheless, he said that last night.
So it's a go, something that we were expected. There's a lot of rumblings. You made me read a French article this morning about Moncton and how the president of high development in New Brunswick soccer, and he's the president of the Moncton Soccer Association too, and they feel that they cannot miss the boat. That Moncton proved with the 2015 World Cup that they can host events, international events, and great events, and they don't want to miss the boat with the Canadian Premier League to have teams from coast to coast. So there's that too. So a lot of positive work being done behind the scenes to make this project come to fruition, and that coming to fruition moment, it has to be close, right? Every signs indicate to, if the timetable stays, 2018 now is getting closer by the minute, but again, it's better to launch in a solid position than to hastily trying to launch a league and then alienate potential partners in advertising, alienate fans with terrible product. So it's better maybe to wait and then have the launch needed than to launch and then needing to relaunch later.
Victor has less than 60 days left before he is required by statute to vacate his position at the top of the Canadian Soccer Association so that he can continue on as the CONCACAF chief. I think that maybe if you think about who's been driving this for a while, that he might want to have that announcement done by the time he has to leave the post. So that would be the timeline that I would be looking at if I were you folks out there. The Moncton stuff, though, real quickly on that. That's kind of the gist of I got it reading it, but I had Kevin read it as well because he's a French speaker and I am not, so I wanted to make sure that I had the details of it. But the fact there's no ownership there is what I was getting out of it. But they're, this guy is trying to convey people that they need to find ownership to get on board to get this there because they don't want to miss it. Basically, they don't want Halifax to take all the maritime market from them. They want to be part of the party too. The fact that you have people speaking in press about this in absolute terms, in like this is happening terms, we need to be on board terms, is something that a year ago I don't think we would have ever seen, and it's quite refreshing to see, Kevin. I'm not, Moncton as a market. We could have that debate in another day, but I'm glad that they're talking about it.
Again, I'm not gonna stop making fun of them for a little while. If you can get people in time at the stadium, there's not going to be a problem.
All right. The other thing that Victor dropped in this, and this actually to me was almost bigger news in many ways in terms of like newsworthiness right now, that we hadn't heard it before, but he did confirm that there have been, at least he didn't classify what level of talks they were, how serious the talks were, but he said that there has been quote unquote talks with both the USSF and the Mexican Federation about putting in a joint 3-country bid for the 2026 World Cup. When he was asked about Canada's role in the 2026 World Cup, he actually didn't speak about a Canada-only bid. He only immediately referenced this co-bid, said that Canada has indicated that they want to be part of this. Canada has indicated that they are interested in being one of the countries that are considered for 2026, but so has the U.S. and so have Mexico. And then he immediately went on to talk about this idea of a co-bid. So
maybe to make sure, Duane, that CONCACAF gets the bid, it's better to join all of us together and secure that bid, and we'll see how we deal with it, than not get that bid.
I don't think there's any chance if Canada and the U.S. and Mexico can work together to create something, and that's not going to be easy because everyone's going to want the final, everyone's going to want the opener, and if you only have an one.
That's true. You cannot play one half here. Okay, let's play 30 minutes in our stadium. All right, we'll stop the game. We'll travel everyone from Toronto to New York to Mexico City. All right, let's do that.
I'll give a compromise. I will give Mexico the opener. I'll give the U.S. the final, and Canada can have the host role. They get the host position because God knows I want to see a World Cup.
Because we're not going to get there. We don't have the host spot.
The other two have to qualify, which they will.
Here, guys. Okay, we don't need to host any game. We just want to have the host title to get in. We just want to be in it. Come on, guys. Let us play. Let us be in. Come on.
I'll take that. Okay.
I'll take it too.
In all seriousness, though, I think that it's a slam dunk if they can put a united bid together that makes sense. But the slam dunk part of it is not the negotiation before that. It's once you get to the FIFA level, because there is a lot of truth to the fact that this region has gone the longest without any amongst all regions between hosting. It is capable of hosting, clearly. It is a rich area. We saw with Copa Americas or Copa Centenario last year that it's capable of making a lot of money for whoever's trying to host things. I don't even want to know how much money would be. Speaking of which, did you see the ticket prices for the El Clasico in Miami?
It's insane. It's a cash grab. It's it's thousands of dollars for a nosebleed ticket. It's crazy.
Yeah. I think the lowest ticket price in the building is $400.
How much you really want to pay to see Messi and Ronaldo play for about 15 minutes and be on the bench for the rest of the game?
If that at all. My message to anyone listening from that, this wasn't on our lineup, but is just don't go. Don't buy those tickets. Force them to give them away. That's how they'll learn. That's how you stop greed like that, is you don't cave in. You don't let friends pay $1,400 to watch a friendly.
You want to go to Barcelona, you want to go to Santiago Bernabeu, you want to enjoy the setting, and you want to play a few $1,000s to go see a competitive game, that's all fine. But to see them coming in a world tour, basically, and just showing up in an exhibition match, it's maybe even worked before to make sure that Messi and Ronaldo score in their 10 minutes on the game. Or it's yeah, you're right. It's cash grab. It's bleeding you dry of your money, and you should respect your time more than that. And why I would say respect your time? You work hard for that money. It's your own time that got you that money. Don't go waste almost a month's salary for some people, for majority of people, on a few hours to just maybe see Messi or Ronaldo. Like, open your TV, maybe that's more worth it.
If you could afford a pair of top tickets for El Clasico in Miami, $2,800 US, that would cost you plus fees. So you're probably looking at close to $3,000. Fly to friggin' Barcelona. Watch the game there.
Exactly. Or how about you go help people in your community that might need that money? You know,
fly to Barcelona and help people in your community.
Exactly.
It doesn't cost that much money. I've flown from Madrid. I can't get the name out of my head. From Madrid to Miami before. It's an 8.5-hour flight. I think it was, I didn't pay for it, but it was about $600. So there you go. You could get that, and you could watch the game probably for $1,000. You could, maybe $1,500 and still have half of it left over.
And you'll have better seats than you will in Miami because the stadium is meant for soccer. Exactly.
All right, moving on. Apparently, NYCFC has handed Iniesta a blank check.
How much you want? Come on, come and play for us. How much you want?
I'd be very interested to watch him in Major League Soccer. If he showed up and tried to play, he's maybe he's the type of guy that can play for a long time too. His style, right? Like, he doesn't necessarily rely on athleticism purely. He's more of just a smart, intelligent, and one of the best passers to ever play the game. Now, that would be the one question I would have in Major League Soccer. If you're one of the best passers to ever play the game, it still depends on someone receiving your pass. And sometimes these guys come in.
Can you imagine he's going to run out of patience really quickly. Well, he's going to play like, I don't know, just for example, he goes with San Jose, and there's Wondolowski never gets his passes, or whatever the case may be, wherever you'll be in YC. So he comes and people like won't receive his passes, and they'll make like the perfect pinpoint pass, but the player won't get to it. It'll make the perfect set of play, but the striker will strike maybe 2 feet wide. But you know what? He could be playing with Villa if that happens, so maybe that won't be a problem.
Yeah, look.
Oh, the pitch. Iniesta at Yankee Stadium, Duane? Playing in a phone booth? Can you imagine what he can do? Like, it's almost futsal. It's going to be futsal for him. He's going to have a blast.
Yeah, so we'll see. I'd be very curious to watch that one play out. And he's one of the, I'm not going to lie, he is one of the few players in the world that I would fanboy over a little bit if he were in my stadium. So I would absolutely be looking to see that great player play live once before. As I said when we were talking to Schweinsteiger, it's there are players out there that you can't be cynical about when you've grown up in North America, because you never dreamed when you were young that you would see that type of player, even at the end, play here. And now we're starting to see them play when they're younger, and I think that that's a great thing. But something to watch out there. I obviously. City Football Group are also about to buy a team in Uruguay. So they're just trying to buy the world one team at a time.
It's easier to buy the team than to buy a player. So they want one player, like, you know what? Let's buy the team. It'll be easier to get the player after.
Exactly. So we'll see how that plays out. Speaking of players that are traveling the world, I wanted to give a brief mention to Freddie Adu. He's apparently going to play in Indonesia next. He's the American Rohan Ricketts. He's got quite the resume going on. I'm not sure why he's still newsworthy, other than the fact that we all kind of remember when he was newsworthy, but he's going to play in Indonesia now.
Yep, exactly. He's our Britney Spears, man. Duane, that's what Freddie Adu is.
There you go. Good luck to him. Immense talent. Look, yeah, there were rumors about his age back in the day, and I hate to go down this line because it's a bit Western centric. It's a bit mean-spirited to talk about that, but when you look at his career after he left the under 20 ranks when he was so dominant, and you see how much he struggled at the pro ranks, you have to wonder whether there wasn't something there, whether maybe he was a couple years older than we thought, and maybe that's what allowed him to dominate when he was younger.
Maybe
you don't know.
Maybe he really developed early. His skill set developed early, where his technique, tactical awareness, and athleticism were higher than other people in his age group. And that was the case up into a certain level. And then skill doesn't matter your age group or whatever, skill stock. And at the end of the day, it wasn't meant to be at the top flight level. But Duane, he's been playing soccer professionally for the last decade. That's worth something.
No, for sure. Better me. We'll end the show today with this. There's only a minute or so left. It'll probably I'll delve into this a little bit more as the week goes on, because there is an interesting story to sort of bite our teeth into here. But Mark Weber is reporting that the Atiba Hutchinson to Vancouver potential transfer, which had been rumored for a while, even to the point that MLS was making noise about doing more to help Canadian DPs come into the league, that they would help these Canadian teams out sign these players or teams out sign these players. He reports today that MLS is not willing to, quote unquote, pay nearly 100% of the transfer fee. If you read between the lines on that, that suggests that the Whitecaps aren't willing to spend very much to bring Atiba in on the transfer. MLS is saying, well, you have to help us out a little, otherwise we're not going to do it. And now this looks like it's not going to happen.
Well,
we'll follow this one.
Sorry, Duane, I was just going to say the signing of Montero and the trade for Breck Shea probably nicked this move in the bud. Some money that were probably going to be used either way were used for this instead of the Atiba, probably the transaction. So maybe they got what they wanted with Montero and with Breck Shea, but we'll see, Duane. There's still some rumors, though, that it would. That's what we heard a few weeks ago. That wasn't over. There's still more players, maybe in the summer window, to come for Vancouver. So we'll see. But the feeling in Vancouver, like it's full on panic mode. So we'll see where Vancouver goes really quickly.
He fit in the Impact when Bernier retires. Would he be a replacement for him almost?
Never thought about it. So I will ponder on that, Duane, and come back with an answer very shortly. Could he fit in Montreal? It's a good question.
Yeah, no, it just occurred to me as we're speaking right now. And I mean, it's not exact, a like for like exactly, but it's not the worst idea either. I have trouble seeing him fit into Toronto. I'll say that. And we're sticking with the Canadian teams here. And there's no reason he has to play in Canada. You could come in as a DP at any team in this league. He's that good. But yeah, in Toronto, you've got Bradley kind of playing almost the same role. So you would almost need to move Bradley out to move Atiba in. And I know that there's a few Patriots amongst the TFC fan base that would like that. Hello, Martin. How are you? But nonetheless, realistically, that's not going to happen. But in Montreal, off the top of my head, it doesn't seem like the worst fit, because he's not exactly like Piatti. He's more of a guy that can play a slightly different role. He almost would fit in there with what Bernier does for them, only a little bit younger. Anyway, something to think about. Maybe we'll talk about this later on this week, Kevin, but we're over the 11 o'clock now. Lots today. We have a good interview with Simon Fudge that was going to run today until all this stuff broke. It will run tomorrow, but until that time, Kevin, as always, say goodbye.
Thanks for listening. Thanks to Brian Dunseth, our guest today. You can follow him on Twitter at Brian Dunseth and listen to him on Sirius XM Radio, and he's on the latest edition of Extra Time Radio as well, the Major League Soccer podcast, produced and hosted on MLSsoccer.com. You can follow Duane on Twitter at 24th Minute and myself at Kev Laramee. Until tomorrow, live 10 a.m. and for the rest of the week as well. And do not forget, every Sunday, 1 a.m. Eastern Time, 10 p.m. Pacific, live, the MLS postgame show, where every game is talked about, results, controversy, trends. Listen to the MLS postgame show. And as always, until tomorrow, have a great soccer. You were listening to SPN, the Sports Podcasting Network. Visit us, sportspodcastingnetwork.com.